All right. Thank you, Dale, for that presentation. And I know I've been to Orchard View before to talk about internet and cell phone use and making choices. And so again, it all comes down to having the information in front of you so that you are making solid, informed choices. That, as I think all of us would agree, at the end of the day, you're making the choice. It's just a matter of what you have in your head as you're making that choice. So think about that. It's my pleasure to kind of lead this little panel discussion. And as I said before in the opening, we've got a kind of a dynamic presence here, and I'm really happy that John Workman took time out of his very busy schedule to come and talk to you guys. I think it's really critically important that we all understand that not everybody's going to go to college or get a four-year degree. And not everybody might not even get an associate's degree. There are opportunities out here, even in Muskegon County, for those of you who maybe college or further education isn't part of your future. And so my first question, Mr. Workman, as a member or as an owner of Eagle Alloy, I'm a manufacturing company here in Muskegon, as well as representing manufacturers in our county. What opportunities are there for people to explore in the manufacturing industry from all levels?
Well, manufacturers, unlike service industries or retail industries, is a higher paying position, typically, much higher. And we have everything from fork truck drivers to metallurgical engineers to vice president of sales. So there's a full gamut of opportunities that you can have in manufacturing. Torchers, welders, molders, quality engineers, sales engineers, scheduling folks, process engineers that design the product itself. So we go everything from right out of high school to master's degrees in our businesses.
So essentially, your manufacturing industry offers a wide variety for those who fit into those categories. Whether you're a high school graduate, there's room for employment in the manufacturing business, all the way up to a master's level, there's room for employment.
Absolutely.
Now, as it relates to the topic that we're talking about here, in particular in the manufacturing industry, how critical is it that you have as Mr. Quigley said, a safe and productive employment area?
Well, it's extremely critical in manufacturing because we have there are a lot of risk opportunities, kind of like driving on Apple Avenue out here sometimes, but you can get hurt. And so almost every accident is preventable. Many accidents are due to lack of concentration or distraction. And so we not only are regulated to do so, but we care about our employees to not get hurt or work next to somebody who might be under the influence who could get them hurt.
Let's talk about under the influence, since you've mentioned that. Certainly in today's day and age, I'm sure even back in the early days, you've been dealing with folks that are either battling substance abuse or bring that to the workplace. Could you talk a little bit about the measures that
Sure.
you take in order to make sure that you prevent that in your arena?
Yeah, not only Eagle, but virtually every manufacturer in Muskegon County and Michigan and the United States will try to create a drug and alcohol-free space. There are several ways we work to control that. One is we have a breathalyzer at work, and so we randomly test for alcohol. We also test if there's suspicion and an employee doesn't want to work next to somebody who's drunk, obviously. So we have an example where shortly after we shared that we had the breathalyzer, this was like 25 years ago, an employee came up and I'd like you to test the furnace operator. Well, the furnace operator, he works with 3,000 degree Fahrenheit metal. We melt the metal and pour it into molds in a 5,000 pound pot. Very critical position. So we did test that operator. He blew a .19. That's like 3 times the legal limit to drive. .19. Imagine what, we were just fortunate he didn't hurt anybody before we found that. And of course, he didn't work there anymore. So we have the breathalyzer, and then from a drug standpoint, there's a couple of ways in virtually every manufacturer tests for drugs. And the problem with the drug testing, it's not like alcohol where, oh, you're over 07, therefore you're impaired and you can't drive. You don't know that. Urine testing for drugs tells us if they've had drugs or marijuana in their system for 30, 60 days, even 90 days sometimes. So it doesn't, if you had a joint a week ago, you're going to test positive on a urine test. There's also a saliva test. A saliva test is where we put a swab inside the cheek, and it has to get enough moisture on it to turn a color, and then we test that swab to determine whether there's drugs in the system. The saliva test goes back just a couple of days. It doesn't go back 30 days, but it does at least tell us if that person could be potentially under the influence of drugs. The third thing we do, as I shared this morning, was we have a Bring a Dog to Work Day, where we work with the county sheriff, and he brings the drug sniffing dog out to the plant, and we look in the lockers in the cars and test to see if there's any drugs on the premise, which is absolutely not in our policy.
Now, I mean, obviously, there may be some students out there thinking that in the industry itself that, you know, or in the workplace that maybe some of this activity is tolerated and maybe even encouraged, but certainly in the manufacturing field, which is an ever-growing and developing field, what is your level of tolerance, if you will, for those that are testing?
Different manufacturers have different tolerances. Most, because of the fact you can't tell if you're under the influence, will say 0 tolerance. If you test positive in our workplace, you no longer have a job here. And that's problematic for you, which some people don't think about. If you get terminated from Eagle Alloy for failure to follow our drug and alcohol policy, here's what happens. You go to ABC company down the road, and he looks at your resume and says, oh, Eagle Alloy. Here I dialed the phone again. That's how old I am. Call John. John, I see Joe Schmo worked for you. So how did that go? And what happened? He said, well, we terminated him for failure to follow our drug and alcohol policy. You think Fred's going to hire him? I don't think so, because he'll just go through the training and have to do the same thing. So that's a real problem for y'all, because that's going to follow you for years if you happen to fail that drug test. And if I may, don't think you can beat the drug test. A lot of folks do. Saliva is much more difficult to beat. I know there are ways, particularly with urine, but for saliva, you don't. And don't take that one chance. Other manufacturers will take a little bit different view of it, and they will say, if you can control your use of illegal substance, in other words, if you test positive, we'll offer you an employee assistance program, counsel with you to see how much you want to get off the drug, and then test you in a month, and if you don't test positive, we will continue to random, but you can keep your job.
As you sit here today, are there job opportunities right now? Are you looking to hire people right now?
8 a week.
8 a week.
We are well behind the curve on number of people. The business is great, and we are, well, Monday, 8 new people started.
And how difficult have you found to initially hire because of a failed drug screen, but more importantly, when employees are hired on and they know that a drug screen is coming, how difficult has that been for you?
Well, it's amazing to me, quite frankly. We just did some data. 29 folks who made it through 90 days were tested. Of those, half tested positive, and they knew that was coming. So either they thought they could beat it, I'm not sure, but half tested positive. So we counseled them, employee assistance program, tested again in 30 days. Only 3 tested positive at that point. So 3 out of 29, that's 10%, couldn't control their use of illegal substance and no longer worked there.
So as the students sit out there today, Eagle Alloy has opportunities for them as they get ready to graduate from high school. And one of the barriers, if I understand it correctly, could very well be if they are testing the waters with substances.
Absolutely, and there's great opportunities too. If some of you do enter the workforce after high school, by the way, we will be around to send out applications in a few months. But if you do, just know that we do hire, we do test, And it's a great opportunity. And if you work full-time at Eagle Alloy, and most manufacturers in town will pay your tuition. So you can work there, go to school part-time, can't get it done as quickly, but we'll pay your tuition, and without debt, you can get an associate's degree or even bachelor's.
So if I understand it correctly, and I hate to keep hammering home this point, but as a high school senior graduating, you can enter the workforce, get your education, and essentially walk away with a full-time paying job and have a lot of your school paid for.
Full-time paying job, tuition paid for, and building a resume for future.
So all you got to do essentially to get those perks is to stay off the drugs and stay off the alcohol while you're working in the workforce.
And come to work every day.
And come to work every day. Well, our last guest today, this is the second time that we've done this type of presentation, and quite frankly, for me, one of the huge benefits not only is providing information to our students in Muskegon County, but it's also an opportunity for me to get to meet some folks that I maybe have met in a different vein, but now get the chance to see how they've turned their lives around. And Ms. Cody Hill is one of those fine examples. It's been a pleasure getting a chance to know her just a little bit as we prepared for today. And I can tell you she is a wonderful young lady who's got a bright future. Ms. Hill, can you first tell, and I kind of let the cat out of the bag, but where did you start school?
Orchard View.
So you were an Orchard View student. Now, I said start, I didn't say finish. Did you finish here at Orchard View?
I did not.
And can you explain why?
I'm not here to lecture you guys. I just want to tell you my story. So I started using marijuana when I was about 14 years old, and that was my first drug I ever used. After doing that, I ended up going into cocaine about 17, and then ended up dropping out of high school.
Okay, and so essentially you had made it through the ranks in the school system, as it were, to the age of 14. You started using substances. Up until that point, were you your garden average teenage girl? Were you involved in anything here at Orchard View?
Yep, I did all kinds of extra stuff and sports and everything like that, until I hit about 14 to where I was more about boys and partying and hanging out, and kind of lost focus on school, put that on the back burner, and hanging out was my main priority at that point.
All right, so at 14 you made a decision. We're talking about choices here. So you made a choice. How did that choice work out for you?
Terribly. Ended up at the end of it becoming a heroin addict, and then ended up going to prison for 2 years.
Now, as a result of, so there's a time period in your life that you missed, right?
Yes, a big one.
So can you, just in a nutshell, tell us, you said at 14, when did that dark period of your life end, and can you describe that for us, please?
Between the ages of 14 to 24, I just used marijuana, cocaine, and then like opiate, like pills, prescription pills. And then at 24 is when I started using heroin, and that lasted till I was about 28, and I overdosed. And I died on a friend's bathroom floor. And then that day, I went to the hospital that night, and my friend brought me back to life, and I found out I was pregnant with my daughter the same night I overdosed. And then I was in prison 3 days later.
So could you describe for our young people here what has meant to you, and maybe if you've reflected on this, missing that big chunk of your life, which is, that's essentially your teenage years, your early adult years. Can you describe, if you've had a chance to reflect on that?
Oh, yes. Well, now, just so you guys know, I've been clean 3.5 years. I'm going to college at GRCC as addiction counselor. I'm a recovery coach. I have a 7-year-old and I have a soon-to-be 2-year-old. I missed 2 years of my son's life. I missed the first half of my daughter's life because of the poor choices and decisions I made when I was young, not knowing how much they would reflect me in my future, petty crimes, breaking the law, minor in possession, like all that stuff carries with you. That name carries with you. And I've had to dedicate myself so hard since I've come home to not be known as the ex-drug addict because of bad choices I've made in the past.
Now, as it relates to, certainly as you kind of went through those years of your life, I know you made those choices, but they probably weren't the choices you were thinking about leading up to that. Am I assuming yes to that answer or that question?
No, they were not the choice. For me, when I was younger, a lot of my family would smoke weed or they would drink or do other stuff, so I thought that that was normal. I thought that's just what people did, that's how people lived. So I didn't know until I got older and was actually took out of that element to know that that's not, it's not normal to drink every day. It's not normal to smoke a joint every single night, to have to relax. That's not how normal people, well, I guess normal might not be the right word, but I guess healthy people, that's just not how healthy people cope with things.
Now, have you had the opportunity, speaking of coping, have you had the opportunity to develop, I mean, because obviously we all have issues. We all have things that we deal with, stressors in our lives, and it's different for every single one of us. And we all come up with mechanisms on how we cope with that. Obviously, at the beginning of your young career, you used substances to do that. Have you found other avenues in order to cope with the stresses of life?
Yeah, for me, my mentor, Nate, 7x7, he was a big help, staying proactive and stuff like this. You know, if I can change one person's life so they don't have to miss so much of their life like I did, that, and then a huge one for me is God. My fiance, my mother, I have a lot of support with coping and stuff like that, but ultimately myself. You know, when I'm alone and I have the moments to where I'm just having a bad day, just allowing myself to step back from everything and breathe and just know that it's going to pass.
Now, I want to talk about, because Mr. Quigley talked about pathways, and you kind of gave us a really brief description of your pathway. I'm assuming that when you started using marijuana, you didn't then decide, well, gosh, you know, I'm going to now try cocaine and then I'm going to try heroin. Could you describe how that pathway formed?
Okay, for me, so it started out just occasionally using marijuana with friends and stuff like that. But, you know, then they would have like older cousins that would come over that would be using harder stuff. And at first I would not try it. I was set on like, I will never be that person. I'm never going to try that drug. But then there was an older guy that was a friend with one of my cousins. So I wanted to hang out with him and be cool with him. So then I was like, okay, I'll just try it once. And then I wanted to hang out with him more, and that's what he did. So I did it to be cool with the older people and hang out with them and everything they were doing. So it didn't transition right away, but because of the people and the crowd I was keeping, it did end up leading down that road.
So I guess, Cody, the takeaway from that, you know, does the folks that you associate with or call your friends, does that play a role in maybe helping in the decisions that you made?
Oh, a huge role. It's when they say people, places, and things, that's really what it is. If you look around you and you can see your 5 closest friends, that will show you the kind of person you are or who you're going to be.
Now, I know, as you indicated, you've turned your life around. Mm-hmm. And I know Mr. Quigley talked about that too, that there is an opportunity that if you have engaged in this or experimented with it, there is an opportunity to kind of flip the script, so to speak, and turn your life around. Do you find yourself, I mean, describing kind of I guess how you were during that time period of using substances compared to now, do you find yourself in a different sense of clarity, if you will?
Oh yeah, really. I think the biggest thing that people struggle with is they're like, oh, I did it, so I'm just going to keep doing it. You know, just because you make one mistake or you've tried something doesn't mean you have to keep making them choices. And being able to actually look at situations with clarity now and not have, because I'm having a bad day. And I feel like a lot of people, they use drugs to cope with their things going on because they don't know how to handle it emotionally in a positive way. So now that I can actually just be able to let myself feel that pain, let myself cry, let myself get overwhelmed, and then let myself calm down and tell myself it's going to be okay, and not make that bad choice to go smoke that joint or to go drink alcohol to feel better, and just be able to look at everything from a clear mind.
Now, you're doing, as I indicated, you've changed your life around. You're doing something very brave now with your career choice. You've chosen to be what we call a recovery coach. And for those in the audience that don't understand what that is, could you describe kind of the career path you've chosen?
Well, a recovery coach is just someone that helps other people that are in recovery, that they want it. They're either already in recovery, in treatment, or they're done with treatment, or they want treatment. So I'm pretty much kind of like their cheerleader. And anything, if they need me to go to dinner with them, I'd go to dinner with them. If they need me to go to a meeting, I'll go to a meeting. I'm like their support system, along with other people that would be in their safety net.
Now, I know we kind of briefly talked about this, but you being a former student here, are willing to offer a lifeline. Could you describe what the generous offer you're going to make to this crowd?
Well, if anybody wants to talk to me at any time, they can. I mean, I've been through it. I've sat in your guys' seats. I'm a little older than you guys, but I know how peer pressure is. I have a niece around your guys' age that I try to tell her all the time about peer pressure. And she's like one of the smartest girls in her classes. Then she gets with her friends and she wants to hang out on the weekends. And them choices live with you forever. They really do. Like, these choices will impact you forever. So if you guys ever need anybody, I'm here.
I know Cody will be around after our question and answer period is over, for those of you who want to speak with her privately. And again, Cody, I just applaud you for the being courageous, having the courage to recognize and make a difference and turn your life around. And I wish you nothing but the best in your success. I want to thank every single one of our panel members here, from Dale Quigley, John Workman, and Cody Hill, for participating.